Did you know creatine is not just a sports supplement but a naturally occurring compound found in meat and fish, and it is also produced by our body in the liver, kidneys and pancreas. So right now at this very moment, your body is making creatine which you didn't even know about. You have probably heard a lot about this magical powder that promises incredible gains and Hulk-like strength. But what's the real story? What is this thing called creatine and why is it getting so popular among gym and fitness enthusiasts? Most people take creatine without really understanding how creatine acts in our body. Hello and welcome to Med Simplified. I'm Dr. Umar Malik, and in this video we are going to talk about the science of creatine metabolism. We'll understand what is creatine and how it acts in our body. We'll talk about how creatine increases our muscle energy levels and endurance. And then in the end, we'll also talk about how creatine leads to muscle growth and hypertrophy. So make sure to watch the video till the very end. So let's first try to understand what is creatine and how it increases our muscle strength and energy levels. So creatine is a naturally occurring compound that is produced by our body, and we also get creatine through some food substances like meat and fish. Whenever we consume creatine or whenever our body produces it naturally, it is first converted into phosphocreatine, which is then stored in our muscles. Now, phosphocreatine is basically a high energy molecule that acts as a reserve of energy, and that is rapidly utilized during intense physical activities such as weightlifting or sprinting. To understand the science behind creatine metabolism, you have to first understand how our muscles use energy in the first place. Let me simplify this for you. The chief molecule that is used by our cells for energy is ATP, short for adenosine triphosphate. ATP is also known as the energy currency of the cells because ATP is like a tiny battery that our cells use to power different activities, including muscle contractions. Let's first try to understand in a very simple way what is ATP. ATP is a molecule that is made of three different parts. The central piece is known as ribose, which is basically a 5-carbon sugar. On one side of ribose is attached adenine, and on the other side we have the most important component of ATP, the phosphate groups. One molecule of ATP contains 3 phosphate groups, hence the name adenosine triphosphate. The energy of ATP is stored in the bonds between these phosphate groups. The third phosphate group is on the end and has the most energy. When our cells need energy, ATP breaks apart by losing the third phosphate group. This release of the phosphate group gives off a lot of energy that our cells can use. After losing the phosphate group, ATP becomes ADP or adenosine diphosphate. Di meaning 2, as it is left with only 2 phosphate groups. Think of ATP like a rechargeable battery. It starts with 3 phosphate groups full of energy. When it's used up, one phosphate group is taken away and it becomes ADP. But don't worry, the ADP can be recharged back into ATP by adding that missing phosphate group again. Now there are 3 main mechanisms by which ADP is converted to ATP again. First, we have oxidative phosphorylation that takes place in the part of the cell known as mitochondria. Mitochondria are basically the energy factories of our cell, and here oxygen is used to produce ATP. This is the most efficient pathway for ATP production and generates a large amount of ATP. The second mechanism of producing ATP is glycolysis. Glycolysis basically means breakdown of glucose, and this process doesn't require oxygen, but this process produces only a small amount of ATP. The third mechanism is the one that we are interested in, and it is none other than the phosphocreatine system. Phosphocreatine is a high energy molecule stored in the muscles, and like we discussed, it is basically the active form of creatine in our body. It acts as a reserve for rapid ATP regeneration. Let's look at how phosphocreatine helps in regenerating ATP in our muscles. Our cells have a very limited amount of ATP available which get depleted after a couple of seconds of high intensity activity. This is where the phosphocreatine system comes into play. Phosphocreatine is basically a creatine molecule with which a high energy phosphate group is attached. Like we discussed earlier, when an ATP is broken down, it loses its 1-phosphate group and is converted to ADP. Phosphocreatine donates its phosphate group to the ADP and converts it back to ATP. During high-intensity exercises such as heavy weightlifting or intense bursts of activity, the demand for energy is immediate and significant. The phosphocreatine system provides a rapid and readily available source of high-energy phosphate groups to regenerate ATP to meet this demand. The first two methods of ATP regeneration, the oxidative phosphorylation and glycolysis, are slow and take time to regenerate ATP. So they are not so efficient in high-intensity exercises like lifting heavy weights. The phosphocreatine process replenishes the ATP stores quickly, allowing our muscles to maintain their strength and power for extended periods. It means that with more creatine available in our muscles, we can perform high-intensity exercises slightly longer before getting fatigued. So to summarize, by increasing the levels of phosphocreatine in our muscles, creatine supplementation enhances the availability of ATPs in our muscle cells, which improves the overall performance in activities which require short bursts of energy. This translates to better performance in sports and activities that require a lot of energy, like weightlifting, sprinting, or high-intensity interval training. So this was all about how creatine increases our muscle endurance and energy levels. Now let's try to understand how creatine leads to muscle growth and hypertrophy. So creatine is associated with muscle hypertrophy as it increases the level of protein synthesis in our muscle cells. Now there are several mechanisms by how creatine improves the overall protein synthesis in our muscles, but the three main ones include enhanced ATP levels in our muscles, enhanced cell hydration, and improved levels of anabolic hormones in our muscles. Let's have a brief look at each one of them. As we discussed previously, creatine supplementation increases the availability of ATPs in our muscle cells. These ATPs, apart from their use in muscle contraction, also provide energy for production of new proteins. Protein synthesis requires a lot of energy. By increasing ATP availability, creatine supplementation supports these ATP-dependent processes and increases the rate of protein synthesis. Creatine also increases cellular hydration through its osmotic function, attracting water into the muscle cells and makes them hold more water inside. This extra hydration creates a good environment for building new proteins. When muscle cells are well hydrated, proteins can be made more efficiently. The process of making proteins requires specific enzymes, and with enough water, these enzymes can work at their best. Additionally, the water also helps to carry nutrients like amino acids into the cells, which are needed to build proteins. Another important way how creatine increases muscle growth is by increasing the release of anabolic hormones in the body, such as IGF-1. IGF-1 is short for insulin-like growth factor 1, which is the hormone released by our liver. It resembles insulin in structure and it has potent effects on promoting protein synthesis, enhancing muscle hypertrophy, and inhibiting muscle protein breakdown. While the exact mechanisms are not fully understood, it is believed that creatine supplementation stimulates the liver to produce more IGF-1. So by increasing the production of new proteins by various mechanisms that we just discussed, creatine supplementation contributes to improved muscle adaptation, increased muscle mass, and enhanced recovery from exercise-induced damage. In conclusion, the science behind creatine is fascinating. This naturally occurring compound offers tremendous benefits for athletes and fitness enthusiasts alike. By increasing ATP levels, promoting protein synthesis, enhancing cell hydration, and stimulating the release of anabolic hormones, creatine supplementation can help you achieve your muscle growth and performance goals. It's no wonder why creatine has become a popular supplement in the fitness world. However, keep in mind that individual responses may vary, and it's important to listen to your body and follow recommended dosages. With proper guidance and a well-rounded approach to fitness, creatine can be a valuable tool in your journey towards a stronger, fitter, and healthier you. In our upcoming videos, we are going to talk about the science behind some of the common side effects related to creatine supplementation. So to get notified about that video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and also hit that bell icon. If you found this video helpful, I humbly request you to support our channel on patreon.com/medsimplified. We typically don't work with sponsors, but making such videos requires a lot of research, writing, scripting, and animation, which all cost us money. So you can support us by making a small donation on our Patreon page. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time, stay healthy and stay curious.